So my first book, Chinese Unchopped, was all about the core techniques of Chinese cooking. And I believe that those core techniques can be split up into 6 or 7 techniques that allow you to cook hundreds of dishes. One of the techniques is roasting and grilling. Now, on traditional days, sort of Cantonese roast meats, let's take those. The difference between sort of your classic Chinese roast meats and a Western roasting technique would be, a Western one would be sort of whack it in the oven and, you know, marinated or salted and let it crisp up and cook around the edge. Whether it's slow cooked or high cooked, either way, first or second. But with Chinese roast meats, you tend to blanch your meats first. Most importantly, when you blanch it, you're sort of bringing out the fatty impurities, and sort of the scum at the top of the water is what comes out of that fat. Secondly, and this is really important, your sort of wind drying process is something that wouldn't necessarily happen in Western roasting techniques. So one of my great uncles, or my mum's ancestral village in Canton, they would have these huge sort of walk-in ovens which allowed the meats to roast whilst they're wind drying at the same time. And the way that that happened was you'd have little sort of wind tunnels at the bottom of the clay walls, thick clay walls of the oven, and then a big sort of chimney in the middle. So you'd walk into the oven, it would be the size of this room, with all different types of roast meats hanging on the inside wall of the oven. And the way that this works is that the wind is going through the tunnel and through the chimney whilst the meat is hung just at the right height above the coal that is slowly cooking that wind-dried meat. And that's what created this amazing sort of crisp around the edge of the meat, but really succulent bites when you bite into it. Another thing that tends to happen, especially with Cantonese roast meats, is that we use this sort of maltose solution. So it's a half-half, 50-50 maltose, which is this like really, really thick honey. You can buy it in Asian supermarkets. And then melt that down with a little bit of hot water and some red vinegar or red rice vinegar. And that red glaze gets brushed over the meat before it then gets wind dried. In Western Chinese restaurants, there's no such oven. I mean, these ovens would be outdoors, really sort of almost ancient style roasting techniques. The new age ovens don't have that function. So what we would do in restaurants, in Chinese restaurants, is you have these stainless steel, almost fridge compartments that might be at 5-6 degrees C that are slowly drying and wind drying the meat. So the fridges are specialist in the sense that they're taking moisture out from the fridge over a long period of time. Roast duck, for example, might be roasted, but before that it will have at least 48 hours of wind drying in that type of fridge before it then gets roasted. So blanching, drying, glazing, roasting, it's almost like 3 or 4 techniques in one that create that perfect roasted finish.